Hi there. It's great to be part of this wonderful event. I thought I would read a bit from my most recent book, The Paying Guests. And I thought, since we're all stuck indoors, I thought I would read a party scene to remind us of gayer times. So, just to set the scene, the book is set in 1922 in London. The two main characters here, Frances and Lillian, are two women who were on the brink of a love affair. They've had a couple of little moments. But on this particular evening, Lillian has brought Frances to her sister's house in Clapham to a family party. They're in a back room dancing. Lillian's dancing with a cousin. Frances is watching from the sofa. And a nice man has slightly attached himself to her, a man called Hewitt. He's sitting next to her. And he has suggested that the two of them make a day trip to Henley sometime. Okay, but basically, this is Frances watching Lillian dancing. She danced well, of course. Frances might have predicted that. Her cousin did too, and with the shift in music to a popular song, they began paying more attention to their steps. Keeping to the few square feet that was all that the small, crowded room allowed them, they managed to work in turns and flourishes. At one point, the cousin took hold of Lillian and whirled her round on the spot. She came down laughing, looking for Frances as soon as her feet were on the floor, so that Frances had the feeling that the laughter was really meant for her. Hewitt spoke into her ear. "She's a lively one, your pal." Frances nodded. "Isn't she?" "She's had a drop too much to drink," he said. "She'll be sorry in the morning." But Frances knew it wasn't that. Lillian saw them discussing her. She leaned away from her partner. "What are you saying about me?" "Nothing," said Frances. "I don't believe you." She kept looking at Frances then across her cousin's shoulder, seeking out Frances's eye, even while pretending to be bothered by it, once stretching out her hand to wave her away, claiming she was putting her off her dancing. The two men, the cousin and Hewitt, began to shrug at each other. "You're too daft tonight," Frances heard the cousin tell Lillian at the next change of music. "You're like a big daft girl. I can't dance with you." But she gripped him, protesting, and wouldn't let him go, laughing again as she did it. And again she looked at Frances. Again the laughter seemed meant for her. At last Hewitt leaned closer to Frances to say, "You and your friend are up to something. Does she think it funny that you're sitting here with me?" "I don't think so," said Frances, not following him. "I think she's pulling your leg about something," he said. "She's a married girl, isn't she?" "Yes. I thought she was. You'd never know it. If I was her husband, I'd smack her behind. How about you?" "Yes, I'd smack it too," said Frances. He drew in his lower lip in a silent guffaw. "No, I mean, have you got a chap? Is that what she's smiling at? He's not going to come and black my eye for me, is he?" His face was such a nice one. She couldn't think what to say. She turned away from him, perhaps rather primly. But she did not feel prim, she realised. What she felt when she thought about it was an odd temptation to settle back against his shoulder, to give herself over to the squash of his thigh against hers. And he must have sensed a yielding in her, or at least the possibility of one, because as the frying pan hiss of the next record gave way to a burst of music, she heard him chuckle. Lillian, she saw, had finally changed her partner. The new boy was slim, fair-haired, one of a knot of youngsters on the other side of the room. He had danced Lillian over to them and was larking about with her there. Other couples had surrounded them, and Frances's view was obscured. She caught broken glimpses, that was all, of Lillian's white dress and stockings, her glossy dark head, her blurred red mouth. Taking another sip of claret cup, she felt Hewitt shift about until the side of his knee was pressing against the side of hers. There was a flutter of breath at her ear, and she understood that he had turned, had lifted his arm and laid it along the back of the sofa. When he spoke, his voice tickled her ear like the buzz of a wasp. He said, "How about this trip to Henley, then?" She kept the glass at her mouth. "Henley?" "Yes," he said, "how about it? I told you I can get my pal's motor car any time I want. It's a lovely little motor, a red one. What do you say?" Frances spoke without looking at him, still with the glass at her lips. "Oh, I don't know. I'm so busy." And then, ludicrously, groping for an excuse and catching at a well-tried one from her youth, "My mother's awfully old-fashioned about that sort of thing," she said. He laughed and nudged her. "You don't need your mum's permission, do you?" She began to laugh too. "No, not really. Anyhow," he said, "I could call for you. Do it properly. Let your mum see what a steady chap I am. I bet she'll like me." He spoke as if everything were settled. His jacket had opened with the lifting of his arm, and she was conscious of his blazing torso, of the hot, hard buttons of his waistcoat. As before, something about the scorching length and bulk of him was oddly persuasive. She knew that if she turned her face to his, he would kiss her. Watching Lillian moving in her supple, muscular way in the grip of her fair-haired partner, she was almost ready to do it. She could simply think of no reason in the world why she should not. She took another warm sip from her glass and closed her eyes. Ewart's breath came against her ear again, beery, but beyond the beer, sweet as a boy's. Then she felt a foot knocking at hers. Opening her eyes, she saw Lillian. The music was changing and she'd left her partner. She wanted Francis to dance with her instead. Francis lifted a hand to say, "Oh no." Lillian caught hold of it and tried to pull her to her feet. "No," said Francis aloud, her drink spilling. She hastily put the glass down. "Yes," said Lillian, still tugging. "Come on." She set her jaw in that stubborn way she had, only pulling the harder the more Francis resisted, using two hands now, and hauling almost painfully at the flesh of Francis's wrist. So Francis rose and reluctantly let herself be drawn into a dancer's embrace, while Ewart, shifting into her empty seat, grinning like a good sport, looked on. The music started up, a tango. Their arms collided. Who's leading? I don't know. They tried a few steps and nearly stumbled, tried a few more and stumbled again, and finally hit on something like a slow two-step, going sedately back and forth while the other couples lunged and dipped around them. But even then they danced badly, their feet tangling, their hands sweaty. Sometimes in avoiding a more boisterous couple they were pushed more closely together. Their thighs or bosoms would meet, and instantly, with a grimace, they'd attempt to move apart. Francis's smile grew fixed and painful. Lillian laughed as if she couldn't stop, saying, "Oops, oh dear, my fault." "No, mine," said Francis. The record seemed endless. They danced on without rhythm, without a trace of delight, and yet, when the music died, they stood among the other couples in their dancer's pose, with their hands still joined, and when they finally separated, it seemed to Francis that the space between them was alive and elastic, as if wanting to draw itself closed. Still with fixed, forced smiles on their faces, they moved to stand with the boys and girls who'd gathered around the gramophone and were noisily debating which record ought to be played next. But they took no part in the discussion. Lillian glanced over her shoulder and spoke in the shadow of the other voices. "He's waiting for you, that chap," she said. "What's his name? You've made a conquest there, haven't you? He's taken a real shine to you." Francis hesitated. Then, "It's your shine," she said. Lillian looked at her. "What do you mean?" "He's only taken the shine to me," said Francis, "because I've taken the shine to you. It's your shine, Lillian." Lillian's expression changed. She dropped her gaze, parted her lips. Her heart beat harder, jumping in the hollow at the base of her throat in that percussive way that Francis had seen once before. And when it had jumped 6 times, 7 times, 8, 9, she looked up into Francis's eyes and said, "Take me home, will you?" Okay, I'm going to leave them there before any more social distancing rules get broken. But basically, great to be here. Stay safe, everyone.